Of all the various species of Xenos that exist throughout the galaxy, those that comprise the Orkoid race are some of the most unique. Thanks to their biology's fungal symbiosis and spore-based reproductive system, Orkoids are not merely a race in the traditional sense, but in fact can arguably be classified as a series of self-contained ecosystems. This is due to the spores shed by Orkoids being able to give rise to any and all other types of Orkoids, providing that the exact environmental conditions are met. There are 5 main classifications of Orkoid, with each of which further divided into a number of alternate strains and subspecies. While the term Orkoid encompasses non-sentient species, such as more traditional types of fungus, as well as the bestial creatures known as squigs, the Orkoid race also incorporates 3 hominid breeds: the dominant strain, known as Orcs, and the 2 lesser strains known as Snotlings and Gretchen. Gretchen, also known more commonly to Orcs as Grots or Runts, are little more than a slave race who occupy the lower rungs of Orc society, though they still hold a higher societal position than that held by Snotlings. Despite sharing a similar physiology, Gretchen are much smaller, physically weaker, and generally more cowardly than their Orc masters, who are not above beating Gretchen into submission in order to keep them in line or simply out of boredom. Because of how wimpy and gutless Gretchen are, the term Grot is even used as an insult between Orcs, used to accuse others of being unorky or generally pathetic. While not as strong, aggressive, or even as fearless as Orcs, Gretchen possess a trait that is less common, if not entirely non-existent, within other Orkoid strains: low cunning. Because of their sly and crafty nature, Gretchen are able to survive and even thrive within Orc society, and have been known to operate and manage black market businesses hidden from the watchful eyes of their masters. In battle, Gretchen are poor fighters, but what they lack in skill and strength, they make up for in sheer numbers, often swarming their opponents before biting and bludgeoning their opponents to death, though more often than not, Gretchen are used as little more than meat shields or to clear enemy minefields. But could a particularly ambitious Gretchen ever rise to a position within Orc society where they could become the leader of a tribe, warband, or potentially even a Waaagh, the Orkish equivalent to an imperial crusade? Initially, the answer would appear to be no, due to one specific trait of Gretchen: their size. To Orcs, size is not only considered a symbol of strength, but also a visual indicator of an Orc's position within their society. The larger an Orc is, the more important and powerful they are compared to others, and the stronger and more powerful an Orc gets, the larger he grows. This in turn leads to individuals such as tribal chiefs, war bosses, and warlords being the physically largest Orcs within the general vicinity, with other Orcs known as Knobs being similar but slightly smaller in size when compared to their chieftains. Because of their large size, being bigger than most other Orcs, Knobs tend to hold a role equivalent to officers and lieutenants within tribes and warbands, and if a war boss or warlord dies, then typically the biggest Knob will assume command, most commonly by physically showing potential rivals just who exactly is boss. Because of how small Gretchen are in comparison to Orcs, this would mean that Orcs would never follow a mere Grot into battle due to the Orcs seeing them as being too weedy and weak. But what if a Gretchen was able to get bigger? As Gretchen share a similar physiology to Orcs, then it's certainly possible that over time, if a particularly aggressive Grot regularly asserted its dominance over their rivals, then they could very well grow larger and more physically powerful, potentially to the point of being able to challenge smaller Orcs to a fight. However, whether a Gretchen, even a particularly large one at that, could best an Orc of any size in a one-on-one duel is still debatable, with the outcome possibly relying more on tactics and cunning as opposed to sheer brute strength. Such a peculiar specimen of Gretchen could even occur naturally through mutation or potential genetic instability, should the appropriate conditions be met, which could very well mean that somewhere within the galaxy there is a Gretchen who is not only larger than normal but potentially more aggressive. Whether or not the existence of such a large and violent Gretchen would be tolerated by the Orcs, however, is another matter entirely. But there is at least one method where Gretchen can indeed become physically larger than most Orcs, in a manner of speaking. If a particular Gretchen is lucky enough, then they may become selected to pilot a construct known as a killer can. Killer cans are Orkoid war machines that are similar in appearance and function to Space Marine dreadnoughts, often armed with both ranged and close combat weaponry, such as big shooters and a pair of razor-sharp hydraulic pincers. Unlike the larger and more powerful Death Dreads, killer cans are not piloted by Orcs but instead by a Gretchen, who is surgically implanted into the machine thanks to the expertise of the odd boys known as Mech Boys and Pain Boys. A common side effect to a Gretchen becoming interred within the shell of a killer can is that they become increasingly aggressive and violent, described as becoming drunk with power thanks to their new mechanical bodies. It's not unknown for a killer can to go on a violent rampage upon their initial activation, as the Grot within seeks to obtain revenge against any and all beings who bullied or previously abused it in life, be they other Gretchen or even Orcs who have earned the killer can's ire. As such, given the increase in bulk, power and sheer aggression gained by a Gretchen once interred within a killer can, it's not unreasonable to assume that a particularly ambitious or spiteful Grot could use their newfound power and size to attempt to seize control over an Orc tribe or possibly even a small warband. If a killer can sought to obtain power for themselves, then the various Gretchen mobs within this particular band of Orkoids could even throw their support, physically, politically, and emotionally, behind their new would-be liberator in an attempt to be seen as equal or potentially superior to their former Orc masters and abusers. If a killer can attempted such a coup, then they do have an admittedly small chance of succeeding, providing that they use their cunning to take the war boss unawares. However, their effort of implementing a hostile takeover could equally go awry if their war boss is big enough, tough enough, or smart enough, leading to this rogue killer can being scrapped or subjected to the experimentations of the warband's Pain Boys and Mech Boys. Even if a killer can was successful, they would still require the constant attention of Mech Boys and Pain Boys to keep their machine fully operational, maintenance which these particular Orcs may prove unwilling to provide. While the idea of Grots attempting to launch a revolt against the Orcs may seem initially unlikely, there has been at least 2 documented instances of Gretchen rebelling and subsequently killing other larger Orkoids. The first of which is detailed within the book Diggernob, with an organisation known as the Gretchen Revolutionary Committee that existed upon the world of Angelus. When an Orc Space Hulk crash-landed upon Angelus's surface, the Mech Boys of the newly established settlement of Mechtown would begin construction of a mechanism that would allow the Orcs to leave the world in order to rejoin their Waaagh, even though the Mech Boys themselves had little to no idea as to the exact form that this mechanism would take, with some attempting to work on a spacecraft, others on a teleporter, and others still on a giant hand to carry the Orcs into the sky. What the Orcs did realise, however, is that there simply wouldn't be enough room for everyone when the device was finished, and introduced the tax system, where Orcs who proved themselves instrumental in the aiding of the manufacture of this device would be allowed to leave Angelus when its construction was complete. When the Gretchen inquired about their tax, the Orcs simply informed them that Grots don't get tax. This led to a violent uprising from many of the Gretchen who had become angered by this turn of events, and the mobs of Gretchen would pull down and slaughter many Orcs before the Orcs themselves finally retaliated. These rebel Grots, as they became known to the Orcs, would be driven out from Mechtown, and forced to wander the desert until they reached a location known as Skid Row. These rebel Grots, now led by a committee of high-ranking Gretchen under the command of the mysterious figure known as the Red Gobbo, would continuously harass their Orkish oppressors. The rebel Grots would even resort to locating orkoid fungal cocoons within the desert to kill the embryonic orcs within and bring any young Grotlings into the fold, swelling their ranks further and further while reducing the overall number of newly hatched orcs in the process. In addition, the rebels would deploy spies and double agents within the boundaries of Mechtown, posing as loyal and subservient Grots, before assassinating certain important orcs, such as high-ranking Big Mechs, or by sabotaging and even making use of high quantities of explosives against the work of the Mech Boys. The second documented instance of Gretchen rebelling and subsequently fighting against orcs was detailed within the audio drama series Prophets of the Waaagh. When the ships of an orc fleet crash-landed upon a desolate desert world due to the creation of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Gretchen on board the Bloodaxe vessel known as the Naga would use the confusion caused by the crash to take revenge upon their oppressors. Under the command of an extremely cunning Grot known as Urko, the Gretchen of the Naga would band together to form the Red Grot Revolution, and under Urko's leadership would slaughter the remaining orcs on board. However, this particular example may in itself be considered anomalous, as it would later be revealed that, while the orcs believed a Waaagh to be coming, this would prove to be false, due to an Imperial experiment involving a psionic generator. This generator contained within it a captive orc psyker known as a Weird Boy, and whenever the generator was activated, the aggression of other greenskins would be amplified to an unprecedented degree, turning upon one another in a savage display of violence. The generator would eventually be destroyed, however, by the Red Sun's mech mob, and their stomper, Fat Mork. But since Gretchen can indeed rebel against other orkoids, then perhaps one day a Waaagh comprised entirely of Gretchen may launch a series of attacks against neighbouring orc tribes and warbands. If these Grots become victorious in their raids, then perhaps other orcs might begin to flock to their banner willingly in hopes of locating a good fight. The only problem with such a rebellion occurring is that it might be confined to but a single planet, due to the Gretchen seemingly lacking the knowledge and skills to construct many forms of technology seen within Orc civilization. Because the majority, if not the entirety of Orc technology is constructed and maintained by the specialist Orcs known as Mech Boys, who thanks to the actions of the mysterious beings known in Orc mythology as Brain Boys, know at a genetic level how to deal with technology and machinery, it would mean that, unless the Gretchen are able to scavenge enough supplies and examples of fully functioning equipment, then the idea of a Grot-led Waaagh launching a full-scale war against their orc oppressors seems little more than a pipe dream of a few disheartened Gretchen. The only way such a Waaagh could then occur is if one or more Mech Boys willingly decided to follow the command of a Grot war boss or head honcho, which is admittedly, from an initial standpoint, highly unlikely. What do you think? Leave a comment below, and thanks for watching.